Today's country is a landlocked nation south of the Sahara Desert. Home to over 60 different ethnic groups, the African nation prides itself on its hardworking people and artwork. Get ready for our next stop around the world, Burkina Faso. My story happened in 2021. I live in a tiny village in Sahel, which is in northern Burkina Faso, where the weather fluctuates with periods of rain and complete dryness. This occurrence happened in November, and the day was unbearably hot and dry. I got home from work early that day and wanted to go home and rest, but I knew I had to take a trip to the market. My family was in need of edible oils for dinner, so I figured I would endure the 5-minute walk in the blistering heat. I grabbed my wallet, told my mother-in-law I would return shortly, and left. My trip was going normally. I grabbed a bag of lentils, but was still searching for somebody selling the edible oil I needed. As I'm cruising the streets, I noticed a large dust cloud in the distance. A few seconds later, a dirty white truck comes speeding through the streets, and then another, and another. A bunch of men in camo uniforms were sitting in the beds of the trucks and jumped out. Suddenly, everybody started screaming and darting for shelter. That is when I knew I was in trouble. The men were pointing rifles at people and shouting like crazy. In fact, there were so many people shouting all at once that it was incoherent. I was paralyzed by fear, and one of the men stormed up to me and screamed, "What are you hiding, and where are the weapons?" I told him I didn't know what he was talking about, and that I was going to go home. He was unhappy with my answer, and grabbed the collar of my shirt and threw me on the ground. I instantly stumbled back onto my feet and hid behind a building. Behind this building there were several other people and children with the same idea, and they told me to just be quiet and crouch down. I complied, wanting to draw the least amount of attention to myself as possible from these men. If I tried running away, they would find me suspicious and throw me in the truck like they did to several other men and women. They were raiding the shops and stands, looking for something unknown to everybody in the village. This finally stopped after 10 minutes because of who I assumed was their leader, instructed them to grab what they wanted and that it was time to drive to the neighboring town. After the tires screeched away in the distance and the last rounds were fired into the sky, I ran back home as fast as I could to check on my family. They asked me what that noise was, but all I could do was just hug them. I said a group of men destroyed the market, took people against their will, and were on their way to do it to the next village. It was later confirmed that this was the work of the terrorist group Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslimin. These devils had been terrorizing Burkina Faso and other African countries for years, pillaging villages, burning homes, and kidnapping innocent people. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, though luckily this group's presence in my village has been limited since then. My best guess is they were searching for a local militia or anyone that would defy them. This was both the luckiest and unluckiest day of my life. My childhood friend Miriam and I had not seen each other for a long time, 10 years to be exact. We went to school together until her family moved to Ouagadougou, the nation's capital, to find work. Since then, we've had no contact, which had understandably made me very sad. One day, by random chance, I ran into an old teacher that we both had. We were catching up on life, and she explained that she was in Ouagadougou for some time, until she moved back into our village. While reminiscing about the past, Miriam came up, and my teacher claimed she lived very close to her in the city and could give me directions if I wanted. I was super excited to reconnect with my long-lost friend and purchased a bus ticket and planned a trip a few months ahead of time so I could prepare both mentally and financially. Although my friend would not expect my arrival, I decided it would be extra fun to surprise her. Eventually the time came, and I boarded a bus for a multi-hour trip. After following my old teacher's directions, I arrived to the building that apparently was home to Miriam. This place was a huge step up from our past residence and had a stable foundation. I nervously knocked on the door, and to my excitement, Miriam answered. She was ecstatic, and we both cried tears of joy. I was given a house tour, a meal, and we talked about our lives for the next few hours. We planned a trip to tour the city the next day, and I fell asleep not too long after because of an exhausting day. The sun rose, and we wasted no time in our planned trip. Our destination was the Musée de la Musique, which was only an hour away. Early in our walk, a vehicle slowly approached Miriam and I, and a man rolled down the window. He asked us where we were headed with a friendly smile. We responded that we were going to the city center, and he responded that we were in luck because that's exactly where he was headed. He offered a ride, free of charge, so we obliged. I know it sounds dumb, getting in a stranger's car, but he was driving a green car, which is typically what a taxi driver drives in Burkina Faso. We were also naive and tired at this point, and some time passed, and I noticed Miriam was getting really uncomfortable. She whispered to me that we were headed outside of the city in the opposite direction we needed to be. She nervously asked the driver if we were headed to the city center, but he was silent. Again, she asked where we were going, but was met with no response. We both started to panic and thought of ways to get out of the situation. The man was also driving extremely fast, so jumping out of the car was not an option. We didn't know his intentions, so we decided staying quiet and complying would be the best thing to do. We tried being friendly with the man and making small talk with him, but he wouldn't answer. It was like we weren't even there to him. I couldn't believe this once friendly stranger completely switched to an evil person so quickly. We were in the city outskirts when the car turned to a house that was nicer than Miriam's. Breaking his silence, the man told us to stay in the car or he would kill both of us, and then proceeded to wield a 20-centimeter knife in front of his face. He stepped out and sheathed the knife back into his waistband. The owner of the house answered the door, and the two seemed to be arguing about something. Miriam and I decided that this was the opportunity, so we silently crept out of the car and sprinted out of sight. We found a local pharmacy who phoned the police for us and locked the doors. An officer arrived to the pharmacy to escort us back to Miriam's house, while his partner was going to inspect the house. The police here are also very unreliable and can be easily bribed, so I'm doubtful anything came of this. My guess is the man was attempting to traffic us, hence the rich house we pulled up to. No matter how friendly someone seems, never fully trust a stranger. This account occurred just recently in 2024. Many stories and news reports revolve around the war in the Ukraine, the war in the Gaza Strip, or the struggles in Afghanistan. But what many people across the globe fail to realize is the crisis occurring in my country, Burkina Faso. We are an average-sized country in Africa that is less known to the world. In my opinion, when people hear Africa, they may think of Egypt, South Africa, Nigeria, or Kenya, but rarely Burkina Faso. Insurgency and poverty are just a few issues crippling my country, and my tale deals with just that. To give you an idea of the severity of our conditions, there were over 2,000 terrorist occurrences in the year 2023, and the casualties continue to grow in 2024. Although I was not directly affected by this incident I will speak on, it still traumatizes me and my family. It was a regular day, except my husband and I were visiting his parents from a nearby village that was difficult yet walkable distance. We were preparing for a feast with friends and family that day, something we were all looking forward to. Because of my absence, the story will be told from the perspective of my neighbor, Musa. Musa was at his house watching TV when he heard shouting outside. The village can be very loud, especially near the market, but what Musa heard was screaming, as in fear of death screaming. He was really concerned with the commotion, so Musa stepped outside to investigate the situation and was frozen with fear. Men armed with AK-47s and machine guns were rounding up villagers and walking them to a designated patch of grass. He said it was a scene of panic, but also calmness because people were hiding in their houses and other buildings, so most of the screaming was from the invaders. The village had been on high alert for some time because of nearby reports of rebel forces closing in on the area, but nobody could have expected what was to come. Musa, with weak knees, fell to the ground, but was immediately picked up by a villager, and they both scrambled inside and locked the door. Musa took one last peer out of the window, but suspiciously could not see anyone or anything. He hid under his bed and was very fortunate to escape the situation. The rest of the story comes from other eyewitness accounts. During the time Musa was hiding, the rebels had gathered enough people unfortunate to escape their grasp and had them on their knees in the designated space. One by one, the villagers were executed in cold blood, either by machete or rifle, and there was nothing anybody could do about it. Christians and other religious groups were the main targets, although every branch of religion fell victim to the attack. Once the horrors finalized, a man with a megaphone climbed onto the bed of a truck and yelled a sort of manifesto in Arabic to those that were hiding. Word of the attack reached my family, and we were shattered. Neighbors, friends, and those dear to us were all murdered in a few short hours. I thank God every day for protecting my husband and I pray the world opens its eyes to the evil happening in my country.